Happy birthday, Marcus. The house erupted in laughter, while Clara sat quietly at the kitchen table, unnoticed on her 16th birthday. I remembered the sound of their voices rising together, the smell of frosting thick in the air, the glare of candles dancing on my brother's brand new cake. My mother's voice was the loudest, singing and clapping her hands, while my father leaned back in his chair, pride swelling on his face. They had forgotten what day it was for me. The word 16 never passed anyone's lips, not once, and all I could do was smile faintly, hoping someone would look my way. Earlier that week, my mother said something strange when she folded laundry. "You'll understand someday, Clara. Life isn't fair." At the time, I thought she was just tired, but as I sat in the kitchen that night with no card, no gift, not even a mention, her words landed like a warning I hadn't been ready to hear. The truth was, my family's favoritism had been carved into my life long before that day. Marcus, 2 years older, was the pride of the house. He was the boy with trophies, certificates, and endless stories of achievement. I was the one who slipped through the cracks. No matter what I did, it was never enough to be noticed, not enough to earn the gleam of admiration that shone so easily in their eyes for him. Our home in Madison looked like any other. 2-story brick, a basketball hoop in the driveway, holiday wreaths hung neatly each December. Outsiders would have believed we were a picture of American normalcy, but inside, the warmth had always been reserved for one child. And it wasn't me. My father spent weekends on the couch watching football on the TV, yelling stats and plays while Marcus sat beside him. My mother rushed to iron Marcus's shirts, pack his lunches, and plan parties. For me? A nod, maybe a distracted, "That's nice," if I brought home something I thought they'd be proud of. I still remember one winter afternoon, clutching a plaque I had earned for winning an essay contest across the state. I walked into the kitchen, excitement bubbling, and held it out like treasure. My mother barely glanced up from stirring the soup. "Yeah, that's nice, honey," she said, already turning toward the oven timer. The plaque ended up gathering dust on my dresser, while Marcus's football medals glistened on the mantel in the living room. That imbalance stretched into every corner of life. At Christmas, Marcus got a red bicycle with shining chrome handles and a bow perched on top. My gift was a sweater that was 2 sizes too big. "You'll grow into it," Mom said, distracted, her eyes already fixed on Marcus wheeling his new bike around the living room. And then came that 16th birthday. I woke early, pulling on my favorite jeans, sitting at the table as if waiting for magic. By dinner time, nothing had been said. My father scrolled through his phone, murmuring to a client. My mother bustled, reminding Marcus about a law school preparatory course. I held my breath when they brought out the cake, a flicker of hope, daring to whisper, "Maybe they'll say it now." Instead, the candles glowed for Marcus. They all laughed as he leaned forward to blow them out, my own birthday swallowed in the smoke. I kept quiet. What was I supposed to say? That they had forgotten the day their daughter turned 16? I swallowed it, like I always did, folding the hurt into the quiet corners of my chest. Marcus cut the first slice and handed it to my father, and then to my mother. No one looked at me until the very end, when Marcus offered me a sliver with a half-hearted grin. That night I slipped away to my room, listening to the muffled laughter rising from the living room. On my dresser, the essay plaque reflected the dim light of my lamp. Above it hung a family photo taken years earlier. Marcus stood in the middle, grinning widely, my parents' hands resting proudly on his shoulders. I was at the edge, half cut out of the frame, my smile small, almost blurred. The photo was dusty, and I wondered if anyone had even noticed. I sat on my bed, knees pulled tight, whispering to myself words no one else would hear. I wanted them to love me the way they loved him. I wanted them to look at me, to say my name with pride. But the house was loud with their laughter, and my voice felt like a whisper against a storm. It was in that silence that something hardened in me. Something I couldn't name yet. I thought about the birthday cards I had never received, the dinners where my stories were cut short, the afternoons when my father said he was too busy to come to my debates. I thought about how invisible I had become in my own family. And yet, even as the sting of neglect tightened in my chest, a small ember of defiance flickered. I didn't know when or how, but I promised myself that one day they would see me, not as the quiet, forgotten daughter, but as someone worth remembering. Clara whispers to herself in the dark, "One day, you'll see me." The community center applauded loudly, yet Clara's eyes kept searching the empty seats where her parents should have been. The sound of clapping filled the narrow hall, bouncing off folding chairs and pale yellow walls. But it was hollow to me. I had poured weeks of work into my first short film, trimming shaky clips on an old computer until my eyes burned, but in the only moment I wanted them to notice me, the chairs I had saved were empty. Mrs. Whitman had been the first to notice something in me. She was a high school art teacher with curly black hair and a voice that carried warmth into the coldest corners of my day. When she handed me the school's worn camcorder, she said lightly, "Sometimes strangers see what family refuses to." At the time, I thought she was exaggerating, but standing in that hall with applause ringing in my ears, I understood exactly what she meant. I discovered filmmaking almost by accident. My school offered a multimedia elective, and I signed up just to escape the endless monotony of algebra. But the first day we pressed record on the bulky camera, something lit inside me. I filmed everything: leaves tumbling across the frozen pavement, children laughing near the playground, even my dog pawing at a squeaky toy. At night, I'd sit at the computer with headphones on, learning how to cut frames, how to let one image bleed into the next. No one at home noticed. My father came back from the insurance office and planted himself in front of the TV, his voice rising with the football commentators. My mother fussed over Marcus, helping him polish resumes and practice for mock trials. I'd walk into the kitchen hoping to share a clip I'd finished, but their attention slid past me as if I weren't there. The contest at the community center felt like a chance. I stayed up until dawn the week before, splicing together shots of the city. Streetlights flickering against snow, a stray cat slinking through alleys, bus stops buzzing with tired laughter. I call the piece Small Things. To me, it was a love letter to the unnoticed moments, the kind of details I thought mattered even if no one else did. When the screen finally lit up that night, my stomach twisted so tight I could hardly breathe. My images played, raindrops racing each other down glass, a lake frozen into stillness, a girl's laughter breaking across the frame. And for a heartbeat, the room fell into perfect silence. Then applause erupted, real, loud, enthusiastic. My name was called for first place. I froze, clutching the cheap plastic program in my hand. My legs carried me to the stage, though I barely remember how. They pressed a small trophy into my palm, the kind of thing that would have meant the world to me as a kid if anyone at home had cared enough to notice. But when I turned toward the audience, the two empty chairs sat waiting. My heart fell as fast as it had risen. I walked home on the biting Wisconsin night, snow crunching under my sneakers and trophy cold in my hand. The houses I passed glowed warm with Christmas lights, and families gathered around televisions or fireplaces. Through frosted windows, I glimpsed laughter, slices of pie, and parents bending down to hug their children. My breath fogged in the air, and I tightened my grip on the trophy, as if holding it harder could make up for the absence I felt pressing into me. When I stepped through our front door, the house smelled faintly of lasagna reheated in the oven. My mother was on the phone with Marcus, her voice sweet and animated. My father leaned back on the couch, nodding along to whatever was playing on the screen. I waited a moment, hoping someone might ask how the contest had gone. No one did. I slipped upstairs, placed the trophy on my dresser beside the dusty plaque from the essay contest, and stared at both of them for a long while. The mantel downstairs was crowded with Marcus's pictures, medals, and footballs, polished weekly. My corner of achievement remained hidden in my room, like a secret no one wanted to share. That night, instead of crying, I opened my laptop. I typed in how to start a YouTube channel. My fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the tiny spark that still flickered despite everything. I uploaded Small Things, telling myself not to expect anything. Maybe 10 views, maybe nothing at all. But within a week, 100 people had clicked on it. Comments trickled in. "This feels like home." "I love how you notice the little details." I read them over and over, my chest tightening with something I hadn't felt in years. pride that mattered. Strangers had seen me. Strangers had cared. I knew I couldn't count on my parents to show up, not at my plays, not at my birthdays, not even now. But I could count on myself. If they didn't watch me, maybe the world would. She logs onto YouTube and uploads her first video, whispering, "If they won't watch me, maybe the world will." "It's lovely, Clara," her mother said of the wedding photos. Before turning the conversation back to Marcus's children, her words slipped into me like a blade dulled by years of use, too familiar, too predictable. I had called her with trembling hands, hoping for something, anything. I thought maybe this time she would linger over my happiness and ask me how the day had felt and what the vows were like. Instead, her voice shifted quickly, brightening as she told me about Chloe's new soccer team and Ryan's science fair project. The photos of my wedding became background noise in her world, like so many other milestones of mine had before. By then, I had grown used to building my life without them. College was the turning point. At the University of Wisconsin in Madison, I immersed myself in communications classes and filmmaking workshops, letting professors like Dr. Samuel Reyes challenge me to see beyond the obvious frame. He was stern but supportive, pacing the lecture hall with questions that demanded answers only I could provide. "You're not just making clips," he said once, holding up a short film I'd produced about late-night studying. "You're telling stories." For the first time, I believed it. I scraped by with student loans and a part-time barista job at a corner cafe, steaming milk at dawn and editing videos until sunrise. My channel, Dawn's Lens, grew steadily, hundreds then thousands of subscribers. I posted quirky campus montages, tutorials on editing tricks, and even heartfelt vlogs about pushing through exhaustion. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. After graduation, I took a leap that would have terrified the girl who once whispered in the dark on her 16th birthday. I launched my own company, Spark Vibe Studio, with little more than an idea and borrowed equipment. I worked from a co-working space with peeling paint, fueled by instant ramen and endless coffee. At night, I dreamed bigger, sketching campaign concepts on napkins. The turning point came when I pitched to Victoria Langford, an investor with sharp eyes and a reputation for cutting through nonsense. I still remember how she flipped through my portfolio, her silence heavy. Finally, she leaned forward and said, "Your work cuts through. Let's make it happen." Her belief was like oxygen. With her investment, Spark Vibe took off, and within a few years we were producing viral campaigns for national brands. The office we moved into had glass walls that reflected everything I had once wished my family would see in me: purpose, passion, success. When the buyout offer came, $18 million from a streaming giant, I felt the ground shift. I paid off every loan, every cent that had weighed on my shoulders. For once I was free, unburdened, standing on my own terms. It was around this time that I met Ethan. I was hunched over my laptop in a coffee shop, editing footage, when he slid into the seat beside me with a black coffee in hand. His flannel sleeves were rolled up, his smile easy. We talked about Madison's winters, about his work as a mechanical engineer, and before I knew it, hours had passed. He wasn't flashy or calculating. He was steady, warm. He became the first person who truly saw me, not as Marcus's sister, not as the invisible daughter, but as Clara. A year later, he proposed, simply, on a park bench by the lake, the water shimmering like glass behind him. "Clara," he said, his hand steady, "you're my home. Marry me." My yes felt like reclaiming a life I had long thought unattainable. I sent invitations to my parents and brother, choosing not to let old wounds stop me from hoping. I even called my mother, voice tight. "It's my wedding," I said softly. "Will you be there?" Her pause stretched into eternity before she answered, "We'll try, Clara." Marcus has a big case that week. The wedding day glowed with string lights and the hum of cicadas. My dress was ivory, simple and elegant. Ethan's eyes held mine as I walked down the aisle, his hand reaching for me with a steadiness that quieted every storm inside me. But when I glanced at the row I had reserved for my family, the seats were empty. No father, no mother, No brother. The hope I had clung to dissolved like smoke. I smiled for the cameras and held Ethan's hand tightly, but inside something shattered. Their absence wasn't new, but it was final. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and still they had chosen not to come. It was Ethan's family who filled the gap. His parents wrapped me in hugs, calling me our Clara. His sister Anna played DJ, dragging us onto the dance floor with laughter that lit up the night. At their backyard reception later, we ate homemade pie under string lights, his father raising a glass. To Clara and Ethan, here's to family. My throat tightened, the words a salve and a wound all at once. When I sent the wedding photos to my mother weeks later, she dismissed them with that faint praise before drifting into talk about Marcus's children. I told myself I wouldn't let it hurt, but it did. It always did. I thought the silence was permanent, that they had finally decided to erase me altogether. But one bright autumn afternoon, I pulled my new Tesla into the driveway, snapped a photo, and posted it online. I didn't think much of it, just another moment of pride in a life I had built brick by brick. Days passed without a sound until the phone rang. My mother's voice, clipped and formal, cut through the line. "We need a family meeting." "So, Clara," Marcus leaned forward at the dining table, "since you're rich now, you can help Ella and Ryan with college, right?" The words struck me harder than I expected. I had braced myself on the long drive to Madison, telling myself I wouldn't be surprised by anything they asked. Still, hearing it spoken aloud with such entitlement burned in my chest. The old brick house stood exactly as I remembered, its porch light flickering, the mailbox stuffed with flyers no one had bothered to collect. Yet when I stepped inside, it felt like walking into a stranger's home. My father, Robert, had greeted me at the door with a curt nod as if I'd just come home for a holiday weekend. My mother, Helen, fussed with coffee cups in the kitchen, her movements tight, avoiding my eyes. Marcus was sprawled on the couch, his phone glowing in his hand until I walked in. He set it down only when I sat across from him at the dining table, the same table where I had once begged for scraps of their attention. The smell of coffee hung heavy in the air, steam curling from mismatched mugs. No one asked how the drive had been, how my husband was doing, or what my life looked like now. The silence stretched, punctuated by the squeak of my chair as I shifted. Then Marcus broke it with that single line, his tone flat, as if the decision had already been made. I was the benefactor now, expected to pay for his children's future. Helen's hands trembled slightly as she set down the sugar bowl. "It's just, tuition is steep, Clara," she murmured, almost apologetic, though her eyes never met mine. My father cleared his throat, his voice steady, almost rehearsed. "Family steps up when there's a need. That's how it works." The words dug deep. I thought of all the times I had needed them. My 16th birthday forgotten, my essay contests ignored, my wedding seats left empty. Where had this creed of family stepping up been then? I forced myself to keep my voice even. "You haven't spoken to me in years. You missed my wedding. You've missed everything, and now you want my money?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Don't make it dramatic. We're just asking for help. You've got millions, Clara. What's a little for your niece and nephews?" I stared at him, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. Chloe and Ryan's faces flashed in my mind, innocent, caught in the undertow of their parents' choices. Part of me ached for them, but the greater wound screamed louder. This wasn't about them. It never had been. This was about a family who only remembered me when they saw dollar signs. Robert leaned forward, his voice firm. "You built something big. Good for you. But don't forget where you came from. You wouldn't have gotten here without the foundation we gave you." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "The foundation?" I repeated. "Do you mean the nights you skipped my plays? The birthdays you forgot? The wedding you ignored? That foundation?" Helen flinched, her eyes dropping to the tablecloth, patterned with faded flowers. Marcus shifted, clearly annoyed. "You're overreacting. We didn't come here to argue. We came here because you can do something about it." The room seemed smaller with every word. the walls closing in, the weight of years pressing down. I felt the younger version of myself sitting at that table again, clutching a soda while everyone clapped for Marcus. But this time, I wasn't the girl whispering promises in the dark. I was the woman who had built her life without them. I took a slow breath, reaching into my bag. My fingers brushed against the folder I had prepared, its edges sharp beneath my touch. Weeks earlier, after my mother's call, I had decided exactly how this would play out. They thought I was coming here to open my wallet for them. Instead, they would never see what was coming. I looked at each of them in turn. My father with his stern mouth, my mother with her lowered eyes, my brother with his practiced smirk. The silence stretched until I laid the folder on the table. "This is what I've done with my money," I said calmly, "and it has nothing to do with you." Helen's voice cracked as she read the press release. 15 million, donated to a children's education fund? The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. My mother's hands shook as she held the paper, her knuckles pale. Robert's face flushed red, his jaw tightening. Marcus slammed his palm against the table, the sound sharp and final, like a gavel pounding judgment. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind, during sleepless nights, imagining how it would feel to finally shift the weight off my shoulders. But no amount of planning prepared me for the rawness of seeing their faces as the truth landed. Years of neglect condensed into this single shocking revelation. They hadn't expected me to resist, let alone to redirect the fortune they believed was theirs by blood. "You gave it away?" Marcus's voice dripped with disbelief. "That money could have set Ella and Ryan up for life. How could you throw it away?" I met his glare, steady now. It wasn't mine to throw away. It was mine to give where it mattered. To kids who don't have anyone cheering for them, anyone believing in them. Robert leaned forward, his finger stabbing the air between us. "You're being reckless, Clara. That money could have secured this family's future. You've lost your mind." Something inside me cracked. But instead of breaking, it released years of stored fury. My voice rose, trembling not with fear, but with clarity. "This family's future? You mean Marcus's future. It has always been about him. Every birthday, every holiday, every achievement. I was invisible. When I begged for you to come to my play, when I waited for you to say happy birthday, and when I walked down the aisle alone, you weren't there. Don't talk to me about family." Helen's eyes flickered, with something, guilt, maybe, or shame. She reached across the table as if to touch my hand, but I pulled it back before she could. "Clara," she whispered, "we didn't realize how much we hurt you. We meant to." "Meant to?" My laugh was bitter. "Meant to doesn't erase the empty chair at my wedding. Meant to doesn't erase the silence when I won awards. You choose. You always chose him." For a moment, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, the sound of its hands moving forward while we sat drowning in the past. Marcus broke the silence, his voice sharp with accusation. "You're selfish. You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is really about." I pushed my chair back, the wooden legs scraping against the floor. My chest heaved with the effort of holding steady. "Selfish?" I repeated. "I built my life with no one in this house cheering me on. I carried my dreams alone. I sold a company for $18 million while you were busy being the golden child. Now you call me selfish because I won't bankroll your mistakes?" Robert rose halfway from his chair, his face thunderous. "We raised you, Clara. Don't forget that." "No," I said, standing now, my voice cutting through his anger. "You raised Marcus. I raised myself." The words hung in the air, final and unshakable. My heart pounded as I picked up the folder from the table and slid it back into my bag. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming every piece of myself they had ignored, every fragment of worth they had tried to bury. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Please," she said softly, "don't walk away like this. We're still your family." I paused at the doorway, my hand on the frame, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Family shows up. Family love without condition. You've shown me what you are and what you're not. Behind me, Robert muttered curses, Marcus's voice rising in protest, Helen's sobs quiet and uncertain. But I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking at that table, begging to be seen. I was the one leaving it behind. As I stepped outside, the night air wrapped cold around me, clean and freeing. The old house loomed behind, its windows dark except for the dining room, where shadows still moved. I walked toward my car, my footsteps firm, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Clara closes the front door behind her, whispering in the cold night air. I'm free. Sitting on her porch with Ethan's hand over hers, Clara realized, family isn't who abandons you, it's who shows up. The chill of the Wisconsin morning nipped at my cheeks as we sat side by side, mugs of coffee warming our hands. The street was quiet, with a few leaves skating along the pavement and neighbors shuffling out with their dogs. Ethan's thumb brushed over my knuckles, a small, steady reminder that I wasn't alone. For so long I had ached for my parents to notice me, to say the words I had craved. But as I leaned into Ethan's shoulder, I knew I had already found what I had been searching for, just not in the place I once expected. In the weeks after the meeting, I cut ties completely. I blocked numbers, deleted emails, and told myself not to look back. The decision felt like tearing off a bandage glued too tightly to the skin. Painful at first, raw, but necessary for healing. Each morning, the silence in my phone felt less like abandonment and more like peace. I threw myself into the foundation I had supported, visiting schools across Madison, speaking to children who reminded me of myself, hungry for a chance, yearning to be seen. That's how I met Mia, a 14-year-old with wide eyes and a notebook filled with sketches of camera angles. She clutched a borrowed tablet like it was gold, showing me clips she had spliced together with free software. I want to tell stories, she said shyly. Weekends became our workshop sessions. We sat in the community center, the same one where my own journey had begun, piecing together her footage of bicycles rolling down sidewalks, friends laughing in slow motion, raindrops splashing on windows. I guided her through cuts and transitions, but most of all, I reminded her that her voice mattered. When she finished her first short film, she threw her arms around me. "You're amazing, Clara." Her words cracked something open inside me. They weren't just about the video. They were words I had longed to hear from my own parents, but never had. And yet, hearing them now, from a child who finally felt seen, meant even more. Life settled into rhythms I hadn't known I craved. Ethan's parents, George and Marilyn, invited us to Sunday dinners. The kitchen was always warm with the scent of roast and potatoes, Marilyn humming softly as she ladled gravy, George teasing Ethan about his stubborn work habits. Anna, his sister, set a pie on the table with a grin, declaring she'd finally perfected the crust. Their laughter rose and filled the corners of the house, wrapping me in a warmth I had only imagined growing up. One evening after dessert, George raised a glass. "To Clara," he said, eyes crinkling with kindness. "Not because of what you've achieved, but because of who you are." The table echoed with agreement, and my throat tightened as tears stung my eyes. I realized at that moment that I was no longer the forgotten daughter at the edge of a photo. I was part of something whole, something that chose me as much as I chose it. Sometimes I still drove through old streets, past the house where I had grown up. The porch light flickered the same way, and the basketball hoop leaned crookedly over the driveway, but the ache in my chest was softer now. I didn't slow down, didn't wonder if someone might step outside to wave. I knew better. The empty chair at my wedding, the silence after my achievements, the cold demand for money, they were no longer open wounds. They were scars, reminders of who I had been and proof of who I had become. At the Foundation's events, I often spoke to parents and children, telling my story, not with bitterness, but with honesty. We don't always get the families we deserve, I said to one group of teenagers, but we can choose the families we build. Afterwards, a teacher pressed my hand and whispered, "You gave my students hope." That night, I cried quietly in Ethan's arms, not from sorrow, but from the release of finally turning pain into purpose. One afternoon, Mia handed me a bracelet she had woven herself, threads of blue and silver knotted together. "So you'll remember you're not alone," she said. I slipped it onto my wrist, the threads light but unbreakable. It felt like a new kind of heirloom, not one passed down by neglectful hands, but one created out of genuine love. As the seasons shifted, Ethan and I began to dream aloud about our future. Maybe traveling, maybe children of our own. His parents teased us with baby name lists, slipping them under the salt shaker during dinners. We laughed, not rushing but savoring the idea that tomorrow held promise instead of dread. On that porch, with Ethan's hand steady in mine, I thought back to the countless nights I had whispered into the dark. "One day, you'll see me." My parents never looked, never cared enough to notice. But I no longer needed their eyes on me. I had been seen all along, by strangers who became family, by mentors who believed in me, by children who now found courage in my story. My journey was no longer about their rejection. It was about the strength to choose love where it lived. Clara's closing thought. My story isn't about rejection anymore. It's about the strength to choose love where it lives. Sometimes the deepest wounds do not come from strangers, but from the people we once trusted most. Clara's journey was not only about success in business or the purchase of a car. It was about reclaiming the dignity that had been denied to her since childhood. For years she longed for recognition, for her parents to smile with pride, for her brother to see her as more than a shadow. But what she received was silence, absence, and finally manipulation. Through this pain, Clara discovered a truth many of us try to avoid. Family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by presence, by those who show up when we need them most, by the people who see our worth without conditions. Her parents believed money could be a bridge back into her life, but what Clara truly needed was love, respect, and simple acknowledgement. By saying no, she drew the boundary that had been missing all along. The act of donating to children's education was more than generosity. It was a declaration. It said, "I will give to those who believe, to those who try, to those who deserve, not to those who only remember me when they want something." Her decision may have left her family shocked, but it left her free. Free to love without fear, free to build a new home with Ethan, free to mentor children who might otherwise remain invisible. The lesson here is clear. Honor yourself first. No achievement can heal the absence of care, but self-worth can. You are not obligated to rescue those who repeatedly chose to abandon you. Saying no can be an act of justice, of survival, of love for yourself. Many of us have faced the sting of favoritism or the ache of neglect. We have been told to stay quiet, to accept crumbs, to believe that blood alone defines loyalty. But Clara's story proves otherwise. It reminds us that silence is not peace, it is erasure. When we stand firm, when we claim our space, we turn pain into purpose. Clara's victory was not the Tesla in her driveway, nor the millions in her bank. It was the moment she chose her own voice over the demands of her family. It was the moment she said, "I am not invisible anymore." The value of this story rests in its warning. Beware of those who appear only when you have something they want. Protect the fragile parts of yourself from those who would exploit them. Most of all, remember that your worth is not a negotiation. Family can be chosen. It can be found in a partner's steady hand, in the warmth of in-laws who embrace you, in the laughter of children you mentor. Love is real where it is freely given. Everything else is noise. So take this story not as a tragedy, but as a testament. We are allowed to close doors that bring only pain. We are allowed to give our energy, our love, and even our money where it matters most. In that choice lies dignity. And perhaps the most important truth of all, sometimes walking away is the only way to come home to yourself. Have you ever experienced this? When the ones you called family made you feel like a stranger? If you enjoyed the story, leave the number 1 and subscribe to the channel, Family Fallout Stories, to hear the next story.